Go on then, kiss your husband. Vian stared at her Uncle Lennox, certain she had misheard him. What? You heard me. He gestured toward the open coffin where the body of Kieran Ashford lay surrounded by white roses and flickering candles. Kiss him. Seal your marriage properly. Unless you're too scared? Behind him, Aunt Cordelia covered her mouth to hide her smile. Elsa didn't bother hiding hers at all. And Dorian, her useless cousin, was already recording the whole thing on his phone. I'm not kissing a dead body, Vian said firmly.
Let go of
That's
me.
disgusting and unsanitary. Unsanitary? Elsa burst out laughing, her long wig swinging as she threw her head back. Listen to her trying to use big words. A 22-year-old with the brain of a 10-year-old, and she thinks she can sound intelligent. Vian's jaw tightened. I don't have the brain of a 10-year-old. I'm autistic. There's a difference. The room went quiet for a split second. Then Elsa snorted. Autistic? Do you even know what that word means? Or did you just hear it on television somewhere and decided to use it as an excuse for being slow? I know exactly what it means. It means my brain works differently, not worse. It means I process things in my own way. It means you're broken. Cordelia cut in, her voice cold as winter. It means your parents passed away and left behind a defective child that nobody wanted. It means we did you a favor by taking you in, and this is how you repay us? By arguing. By making us look foolish in front of important people? Vian flinched. The words hit her like physical blows, each one landing exactly where it hurt most. That's not fair, she whispered. Life isn't fair, sweetheart. Lennox grabbed her arm and yanked her toward the coffin. Now stop embarrassing us and kiss your husband goodbye. Show some respect for the deceased. I said no. Vian tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Let go of me. Such a fuss over nothing. Cordelia rolled her eyes dramatically. Just do it quickly and we can all move on with our lives. Lord knows we've wasted enough time on you already. I won't. I don't care what you say. I'm not putting my mouth on a corpse. Lennox's face darkened with rage. His free hand rose, ready to strike. Inside the coffin, Kieran Ashford's jaw clenched. He could hear everything, every insult, every cruel word, every moment of humiliation being heaped upon the girl who was now, legally, his wife. The coffin's ventilation system hummed quietly beneath him, feeding fresh air through tiny holes concealed in the decorative trim along the base. It allowed him to breathe, to stay conscious, to listen to what was happening in his own memorial hall. A 22-year-old with the brain of a 10-year-old. Broken. Defective. Nobody wanted you. His hands remained flat at his sides, but his fingers pressed hard against the silk lining. Staying still was discipline. Staying silent was strategy. But listening to this was testing the limits of both. He didn't care about the girl, not personally. She was a means to an end, a necessary piece in a very complicated game. The Ashford-Whitmore marriage contract had been signed 30 years ago, and honoring it had been the simplest solution to a complex problem. But she was still his wife, and no one disrespected what belonged to Kieran Ashford. I said no. The girl's voice again, defiant despite the fear in it. Let go of me. The sound of a scuffle, the sharp intake of breath that meant someone was about to be struck. Kieran's control held. Barely. And then, step away from Mrs. Ford. Theo's voice. Calm, lethal, carrying the promise of violence without raising above conversational volume. Kieran allowed himself a single, controlled exhale. The situation was handled. For now. In the memorial hall, everything had frozen. Theo Sterling stood at the entrance, dressed entirely in black, his light brown skin and clean goatee giving him the appearance of a model for expensive menswear. But there was nothing soft about his eyes. Nothing gentle about the way he assessed the room, like he was calculating exactly how many seconds it would take to neutralize everyone in it. Who the hell are you? Lennox demanded, his hand still raised to strike Vian. Theo Sterling, head of security for the Ashford estate. He walked into the room, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors. And I'm going to need you to take your hands off Mr. Ford's wife, immediately. Lennox sputtered. I'm her uncle. I have every right to... You have no rights here. Theo stopped directly in front of him, close enough to be threatening. His voice never rose, but somehow that made it worse. This is Ashford property. Mrs. Ford is in Ashford now. Whatever authority you think you have ended the moment she signed that marriage contract. We were just having a bit of fun, Cordelia said quickly, her tone suddenly sweet. Family bonding. Surely you understand how families can be. I understand perfectly. Theo's gaze moved to Dorian's phone. Delete that video, now. What? No way, man, this is hilarious. Delete it, or I will do so along with your fingers. Dorian went pale. The phone vanished into his pocket. I think, Theo said calmly, it's time for the Whitmore family to leave. Leave? Elsa stepped forward, outraged. We just got here. The vigil doesn't start until tonight. We have every right to... You have the right to exit through that door. Theo pointed. Now, before I have you escorted out in a manner you won't enjoy. For a long moment, nobody moved. And then Uncle Lennox smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Fine, we'll go. He straightened his suit jacket and shot Vian a look that promised consequences. But this isn't over. Remember who you belong to, girl. Remember who raised you when no one else wanted you. They left. The heavy doors closed behind them with a boom that echoed through the memorial hall. And then it was just Vian, standing alone in a room full of candles and flowers and death. Mrs. Ford. Theo's voice was professional, neutral. Would you like me to escort you to your room? You'll need rest before the vigil tonight. Vian looked at the coffin, at the man inside it, at the face she had only glimpsed before her family started their torment. Can I stay a little longer? She asked quietly. Just a few minutes. I'd like to pay my respects, since I didn't get to meet him when he was alive. Theo's eyes flickered toward the coffin for the briefest moment. Of course, Mrs. Ford. Take all the time you need. I'll be right outside. He left, closing the doors behind him. Silence. Vian stood alone in the memorial hall, surrounded by candles and flowers and the overwhelming presence of death. She should have been scared. Any normal person would have been terrified to be alone with a corpse. But Vian had stopped being scared of death a long time ago. She approached the coffin slowly, her worn shoes making soft sounds on the marble floor. The scratchy black veil Cordelia had forced onto her head itched terribly, and she reached up to adjust it with a grimace. Then she looked down at Kieran Ashford's face, and her breath caught. Wow, she whispered. You're really pretty. Inside the coffin, Kieran's eyebrow nearly twitched. Pretty. He had been called many things in his 32 years. Terrifying, ruthless, dangerous, the Reaper. A man whose name made grown executives surrender before the battle even began. No one had ever called him pretty. I mean, I know you can't hear me, Vian continued, talking to herself the way lonely people often did. Or maybe you can? Some people believe spirits hang around after death, watching over their loved ones. I don't know if that's true, but just in case you're listening. She tilted her head, studying his features. I'm Vian. I guess I'm your wife now. Which is strange, right? I didn't even know you existed until 3 days ago, and now I'm married to you. They didn't really explain what was happening. They just shoved some papers in my face and told me to sign. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across his still face. They wanted me to kiss you just now. My family, I mean. Well, they're not really my family. They're just people who took me in after my parents passed away and went to heaven. But that's a whole complicated story. She peered at his lips, then shook her head firmly. I wasn't going to kiss you, though. I read somewhere that you can get sick from touching deceased bodies. Something about bacteria and decomposition. I'm actually pretty intelligent, you know. People think I'm stupid because I have trouble reading now, but that's not the same thing as being dumb. I used to read all the time before everything changed. She straightened up and looked around the room. Surrounding the coffin were offerings, fruit stacked in beautiful arrangements, pastries that looked like they belonged in a fancy bakery window. And in the center of it all, a massive chocolate cake with white frosting flowers that made Vianne's mouth water. Her stomach growled, loudly, almost embarrassingly loud. Rich people waste so much food, she muttered, eyeing the spread with longing. All of this is just going to sit here until it goes bad. Then they'll throw it away like it's nothing. Do you have any idea how many people are starving out there? And here's all this perfectly good food just sitting here, being wasted, for a person who can't even eat it. No offense. She looked at Kieran's still form, then back at the food. I mean, you're not going to eat any of it, right? And I'm your wife now. That makes me technically part of this family. And if I'm part of this family, then that food is partly mine. So really, I wouldn't be stealing. I'd be preventing waste. That's environmentally responsible. She was talking herself into it. She knew she was. But she was so hungry, and the cake was right there, and nobody was watching. I'm going to take your silence as permission, she decided. She yanked off the scratchy black veil with a sigh of relief, tossed it onto a nearby chair, and made her way to the offering table. The cake was even more beautiful up close. Layers of rich chocolate sponge, perfectly smooth frosting, delicate sugar flowers that looked almost real. Vianne's hand hovered over the cake, trembling slightly. Then she picked up a fork and took a small bite directly from the edge. The chocolate melted on her tongue. Sweet, rich, perfect. Tears sprang to her eyes without warning. It tasted like birthdays she'd never had, like celebrations that were stolen from her, like love wrapped in sugar and cocoa. This is, she whispered, her voice catching. This is what birthday cake tastes like. She wanted to eat more. She wanted to devour the entire thing. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the setting, the coffin looming nearby, the weight of the room pressing down on her. Maybe it was the voice in her head, Cordelia's voice, telling her she didn't deserve nice things. She managed 2 more small bites before guilt overwhelmed her. That's enough, she told herself, putting down the fork. You should be grateful for what you got. Don't be greedy. She picked at some grapes instead, barely tasting them. Then a corner of a pastry that was too rich for her nervous stomach to handle. Her stomach was no longer growling, but it was far from full. Just quieter, appeased for the moment. She walked back to the coffin and bowed deeply, the way her mother had taught her to show respect. Thank you for the food, Mr. Ashford. I know you didn't technically give it to me, but I'm going to pretend you did because it makes me feel less guilty. She straightened up and offered the coffin a small, genuine smile. I should go find my room now. They said there's a vigil tonight and I need to rest. It was nice meeting you. Sort of. In a sad, you're gone kind of way. She turned and walked toward the heavy double doors, pushed them open, stepped out into the hallway, started walking toward where she thought her room might be, and stopped. Her hand flew to her head. The veil. She'd left her veil inside by the chair. Cordelia will end me if I lose that thing, she muttered, spinning back around. She'll say I did it on purpose to embarrass the family. She'll probably make me sleep outside or lock me in the basement or something worse. She hurried back down the hallway, pushed open the heavy doors, and stepped back into the memorial hall. Her eyes scanned for the black fabric she'd tossed aside so carelessly. There it was, on the chair near the offering table, right where she'd left it. She walked toward it, bent down to pick it up, and froze, because she could hear a voice, a deep male voice, coming from directly behind her. "Yes, I'll handle it. Just keep monitoring the accounts. If anyone makes a move, I want to know immediately." Vian's blood turned to ice. Slowly, very slowly, she straightened up. The veil clutched in her white-knuckled grip, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She turned around, and every coherent thought evacuated her brain. Kieran Ashford was sitting on the edge of his coffin, long legs crossed casually, phone pressed to his ear, biting into an apple with his free hand like he was lounging in a park on a Sunday afternoon. Very, very much alive. Vian screamed, or tried to. The sound caught in her throat, emerging as more of a strangled squeak. She spun around, lost her balance, and stumbled backward into the offering table. Fruit went rolling. A candelabra crashed to the floor. He was tall, so tall that she had to crane her neck to look at him. Broad-shouldered and massively built, the kind of physique that suggested controlled power rather than gym vanity. His hair was styled in neat cornrows that traveled back over his scalp, the sides faded clean. A 5 o'clock shadow darkened his jaw. And his eyes were dark, not brown, not black. Something in between, deep and unreadable, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He looked like death itself had decided to put on a suit and walk among the living. For approximately 3 seconds, Vian's brain simply refused to process what she was seeing. Dead man. In coffin. Now sitting on coffin. Eating apple. Talking on phone. Not dead. Not dead. Then her survival instincts kicked in. "Ghost!" she screamed, stumbling backward so fast she crashed into the offering table again. More fruit went rolling across the marble floor. Another candelabra toppled with a metallic crash. "Stay back. I'll send you to the other side. The power of Christ compels you." Kieran didn't even flinch. He just raised one eyebrow slightly and said into his phone, "Let me call you back. Something's come up." He ended the call and took another bite of his apple, completely unbothered. Vian grabbed the nearest object, a silver serving tray, and held it in front of her like a shield. "I'm warning you. I've seen movies. I know how this works. You're supposed to go into the light." "The light," Kieran repeated, his voice flat. "Yes, the light. It's peaceful there. Your loved ones are waiting. Just go." "Do I look like a ghost to you?" he asked. "Yes. You were dead, in the coffin. I saw you. You weren't breathing." "Ghosts can't eat." He held up the apple, now missing several bites. "This is a physical apple. I am physically chewing it. Ghosts traditionally cannot interact with physical objects. Logic would suggest I'm not a ghost." Vian's racing mind tried to process this. Dead people didn't eat. Ghosts weren't solid. But this man was definitely eating. And definitely solid. And definitely looking at her like she was the strangest thing he'd ever encountered. "Oh my God," she breathed, the tray lowering slightly. "You're alive." "Congratulations. You got there eventually." "You're alive." The tray clattered to the ground as the full realization hit her. "This is a miracle. You came back from the dead. I have to tell someone. Theo, Mr. Calloway, the whole city needs to know. This is incredible. She spun toward the door, ready to sprint out and announce the miraculous resurrection to the world. She made it exactly 2 steps. A hand closed around her arm like a steel trap, and suddenly she was being yanked backward. The room spun. Her back hit something solid, his chest, and then she was being turned around to face him. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Tall. So tall she had to crane her neck to look at him. Broad-shouldered and massively built, the kind of physique that came from years of disciplined training. The cornrows she'd noticed before traveled neatly across his scalp, the sides shaved close to reveal the perfect shape of his head. A 5 o'clock shadow darkened his jaw, and those eyes, those impossibly dark eyes, were locked onto hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Let me be very clear, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I didn't come back from the dead. I was never dead in the first place. Vian blinked. What? It was an act, a performance. The funeral, the coffin, the mourning. All of it was staged. But I saw you in there. You weren't moving. You weren't breathing. The coffin has a ventilation system built into the base, he said, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Small air holes concealed in the decorative trim, completely invisible from above. I only needed to be in there for short periods when people were visiting. The rest of the time, I was elsewhere. Vian's mind reeled. You were pretending. This whole time, you were pretending to be dead. Yes. But why? Why would anyone pretend to be dead? That's none of your concern. His grip on her arm tightened slightly. Not painful, but firm. Inescapable. What is your concern is the fact that you now know my secret. A secret that very few people are aware of. Very few people? A tiny spark of hope. So, other people know? I'm not the only one? My security team knows. That's it. And they're all loyal to me, completely. His dark eyes bore into hers. You, on the other hand, are an outsider. A Whitmore. And Whitmores, as I've recently discovered, cannot be trusted. The hope died as quickly as it had been born. So, what happens now? Vian asked, her voice smaller than she intended. You're going to deal with me? Make sure I can't talk? That's certainly one option. One option. What are the other options? He smiled. It was not a comforting smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered his prey and was deciding how to proceed. Still working those out. Vian's heart was hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to run, to do something. But his grip was unbreakable, and even if she somehow escaped, where would she go? This was his house, his territory, his world. She was completely and utterly at his mercy. I won't tell anyone, she said desperately. I swear, I'm actually really good at keeping secrets. When I was 12, my friend Destiny told me she had a crush on Trevor Morrison, and I never told a single person, not even when Trevor asked me directly. I just pretended I didn't know anything. See, I'm trustworthy. Kieran stared at her. Trevor Morrison. He was very popular. Everyone wanted to know who liked him. But I never said a word. My lips were sealed. And you think your ability to keep a childhood secret qualifies you to keep this one? I mean, yes? Secrets are secrets, right? The principle is the same. The principle, he repeated flatly. Yes, the principle of not telling things you're not supposed to tell. I'm excellent at that principle. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, amusement, annoyance. Vian couldn't tell. Reading faces had always been difficult for her, and reading this face felt like trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics. Without warning, he moved. One arm swept under her legs, the other wrapped around her back. Before Vian could even process what was happening, she was off the ground, held against his chest like she weighed nothing at all. What are you doing? She yelped, instinctively grabbing onto his shoulders. Put me down. Stop squirming. Put me down. I said stop. This is kidnapping. I don't care if I'm technically your wife. This is still kidnapping. He was already walking, carrying her out of the memorial hall and down a long corridor. His stride was unhurried, completely unbothered by her protests. It was like carrying a particularly chatty pillow. Any last requests? He asked casually. Vian stopped struggling. The words registered slowly, their meaning sinking in like cold water. What? Before I send you onwards, any last requests? I'm not completely heartless. She stared at him, searching for any sign that he was joking. Any hint of humor or mercy in those dark, unreadable eyes. She found none. Cake, she said finally. His steps faltered slightly. What? Cake. The chocolate cake from the memorial hall. She lifted her chin, trying to project a confidence she absolutely did not feel. I only got a few bites before I stopped myself. If I'm going to go permanently, I want to actually taste it properly. I want to eat a whole slice without feeling guilty. I want to know what it feels like to have birthday cake without anyone telling me I don't deserve it. Kieran had stopped walking entirely. He was looking at her like she had just spoken in a language that didn't exist. Birthday cake, he said slowly. I've never had one for years now. A birthday cake, I mean. My parents were going to make me one for my 16th birthday, but they passed away before it happened. And after that, nobody ever... She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. Never mind, it's stupid. Just forget I said anything. It's not stupid. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. What? I said it's not stupid. His voice was different now, softer. Something human flickering behind the cold mask. Wanting cake isn't stupid. He started walking again, but his pace had changed. Less predatory, more purposeful. Finally, he stopped in front of a door at the end of a long hallway. He pushed it open with his shoulder and carried her inside. The room was enormous, dominated by a massive bed with black silk sheets that probably cost more than everything Vian had ever owned combined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Philadelphia's skyline at night, city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Everything was dark, elegant, and overwhelmingly masculine. Kieran deposited her onto the bed without ceremony. Vian bounced once, twice, then scrambled to sit up, her eyes wide and darting around the room like a cornered animal looking for escape routes. He stood over her, all 6 feet 4 inches of coiled power and controlled menace. In this light, she could see him even more clearly. The way the shadows played across his features. The intensity in those dark eyes that never seemed to blink. The way he held himself like someone who had never lost a fight in his life and never intended to start. Stay here, he said. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Wait, Vian called out. Where are you going? What about the silencing me permanently thing? He paused, his hand on the door handle. I'm getting your cake. Your what? Cake. You asked for cake. Yes, I'm getting it. He glanced back at her, and something almost like amusement crossed his face. Try not to have a breakdown while I'm gone. He left. Vian stared at the closed door, her mind spinning. What just happened? She whispered to the empty room. In the hallway, Kieran pulled out his phone and dialed. Theo, my room, now, and bring 2 slices of chocolate cake from the memorial hall. He ended the call and leaned against the wall, pinching the bridge of his nose. Cake. She had asked for cake. He had threatened to end her existence, and she had asked for birthday cake because she'd never had one. Who was this girl? 5 minutes later, Theo appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying a silver tray with 2 perfect slices of chocolate cake. His expression was carefully neutral, but Kieran had known him long enough to see the questions lurking behind his eyes. Sir, Theo said, stopping beside him. The cake you requested. Thank you. Kieran took the tray but didn't move toward his room. What's the status on the other matter? Theo's expression shifted slightly. That's actually why I was coming to find you. He lowered his voice. You need to return to the coffin. Soon. Kieran's jaw tightened. Why? Silver is on her way. She called ahead, said she wants to pay her respects to her stepson before the burial tomorrow. The name hit Kieran like a bucket of ice water. Silver, his stepmother, the woman who had married his father 3 years before the old man's death. The woman who had been trying to claw her way into control of the Ashford Empire ever since. And the woman who was almost certainly behind the attempt on his life. When? Kieran asked, his voice dangerously quiet. She'll be here within the hour. She needs to see your body in the coffin or the entire charade falls apart. Theo paused. After her visit, we can proceed with the fake burial. Then you can emerge from the shadows and we can finally end this. Kieran was silent for a long moment, processing. Silver. She was coming here, to look at his corpse, to gloat probably, to make sure he was really gone so she could proceed with whatever scheme she had cooked up. Fine, he said finally. I'll be there. But first, he looked down at the tray in his hands. 2 slices of cake, one for him, one for a strange girl who had asked for birthday cake with her dying breath. First, I have something to handle. Theo followed his gaze toward the bedroom door. The girl, what are you planning to do with her? I haven't decided yet. She knows you're alive. I'm aware. She could compromise everything. I said I'm aware. Kieran's voice carried an edge that made Theo straighten slightly. But she's not what I expected. Sir? She asked for cake, Theo. I told her I was going to silence her permanently, and she asked if she could have cake first because she's never had a birthday cake in her life. Kieran shook his head slowly. She's either the bravest person I've ever met or the strangest. Possibly both. Or she's a very good actress. Maybe. But even as he said it, Kieran didn't believe it. There had been something in her eyes when she talked about the cake. Something raw and genuine. And something that couldn't be faked. Start watching the Whitmores, he said finally. I want to know everything about them. And Mrs. Ford? Kieran looked at the door again. Mrs. Ford, he said slowly, testing the words, stays with me, for now. Okay, family, I need to pause right here because Vian is sitting in a billionaire's bedroom waiting for cake, having no idea that she just walked into the middle of a family war. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me, do you think Kieran is going to protect Vian? Or is she just a pawn in his revenge game? And how exactly did she end up marrying a man that was supposedly dead? Now let me take you back to where this all began. Because to understand how Vian ended up in this situation, you need to know the girl she used to be, aught before everything was taken from her. Vian Whitmore was born brilliant. Her mother, Elaine, knew it from the moment Vian started talking. While other 3-year-olds were babbling nonsense syllables, Vian was asking questions that made grown folks stop and think. Mummy, why do people get old? Daddy, where does the sun go at night? If the sky is so big, why can't I reach it? That child thinks too much, Elaine's mother used to say. Her brain never stopped spinning. But Elaine and her husband Douglas didn't see it as a problem. They saw it as a gift. Douglas Whitmore was a self-made man, a pharmaceutical entrepreneur who had built his empire from nothing but determination and sleepless nights. He saw himself in his daughter's endless curiosity. He filled her room with books. He enrolled her in the best schools. And he told her every single day that she could be anything she wanted to be. And Vian believed him. Yes, she was different. Yes, her brain worked in ways that sometimes confused other children. The doctors had a word for it: autism. But her parents never treated it like a disease or a defect. They called it her superpower. They said it meant she saw the world in ways others couldn't imagine. By 10, she was reading at a college level. By 12, she was devouring books on biology, astronomy, philosophy. By 14, she was helping her father review contracts, her sharp mind catching errors that expensive lawyers had missed. That's my girl, Douglas would say, beaming. That's my brilliant, beautiful girl. For 16 years, Vian lived in a world wrapped in love. She was happy, genuinely, completely happy. And then, on a rainy October night, everything shattered. The accident happened on Aquai 76 near the Schuylkill River. Douglas and Elaine were returning from New York. The roads were slick, the visibility was poor, and a drunk driver ran a red light at 60 miles per hour. The police said they passed away on impact, quick, painless. But Vian's pain was just beginning. She cried for months. Not just crying, sobbing, screaming into pillows, waking up in the middle of the night unable to breathe. The grief was a physical thing, tearing through her body, leaving her hollow and broken. And somewhere in those dark months, something changed in her brain. The books she had once loved became impossible to read. Not because she couldn't see them. Her vision was perfect. But when she looked at text, the letters seemed to move, to swim, to rearrange themselves into meaningless patterns that made her head pound and her stomach churn. The school counselor said it was trauma, psychological, a trauma response that had rewired the way her brain processed written words. Something about the grief being so overwhelming that her mind had created a block, associating reading with her father's study, her mother's bedtime stories, everything she had lost. It's not uncommon, the counselor had explained gently. Severe emotional trauma can manifest in unexpected ways. With proper therapy and treatment, we can help her work through this. But by then, Vian was living with Uncle Lennox and Aunt Cordelia, and they didn't believe in therapy. There's nothing wrong with her, Cordelia told the school. She's just lazy. She's looking for attention. Her parents spoiled her, and now she thinks she can fake her way out of doing any real work. They threw away the counselor's referrals. They ignored the teacher's notes. They told Vion to stop pretending and start being useful. And when she couldn't read the recipes they demanded she follow, when she couldn't read the cleaning instructions they shoved at her, when she struggled with every written word in a way she never had before, they called her defective, a burden. Your brain is fine, Cordelia would snap whenever Vian tried to explain. You're just not trying hard enough. You read perfectly well before your parents died. You're choosing not to read now because you want sympathy. But Vian wasn't choosing anything. Every time she looked at text, her heart would start racing. Her palms would sweat. The letters would blur and swim. Megan, she would be right back in that moment. That terrible moment when the police came to the door and told her that her parents were never coming home. Reading had become trauma. Books had become grief. And no one would help her. Year after year, the words piled up like bricks, building a wall between Vian and the brilliant girl she used to be. Eventually, she stopped trying to read at all. The mere sight of text made her anxious, made her stomach clench, made her feel like the failure they always told her she was. They pulled her out of school, put her to work in the house, treated her like a servant while they spent her inheritance on luxury cars and designer clothes. And 3 days ago, they had made her sign a document she couldn't read. Just sign it, Uncle Lennox had ordered, shoving the paper toward her. It's nothing important, just some legal formalities. But I don't know what it says. For God's sake, girl. He slammed his hand on the table. After everything we've done for you, just sign the paper. And because she was scared, because she was conditioned to obey, because she had no one in the world to protect her, she signed a marriage contract to a dead man. Back in Kieran's bedroom, Vian sat on the edge of the massive bed, trying to process everything that had happened. She was married to a man who wasn't actually dead, a man who had threatened to silence her permanently, a man who was now, apparently, getting her cake. The door opened. Kieran walked in, carrying a silver tray with 2 slices of chocolate cake. He moved across the room with that predator's grace she was already beginning to recognize and set the tray on the bedside table. Eat, he said. Vian looked at the cake, then at him, then back at the cake. Is this a trick? She asked suspiciously. Like a last meal situation? Do you want the cake or not? I want the cake. I just want to know if there's a catch. The catch is that you're going to eat it and stop asking questions for 5 minutes. Can you manage that? Vian decided not to push her luck. She reached for the plate and fork and took a bite. The cake was even better than before. Rich, moist, perfectly sweet. She closed her eyes as the chocolate melted on her tongue, a small sound of pleasure escaping before she could stop it. When she opened her eyes, Kieran was watching her. "What?" she asked, mouth full. "Nothing." But he didn't look away. His dark eyes stayed fixed on her face, on the way her cheeks flushed with pleasure, on the small smear of frosting at the corner of her mouth. Then he blinked and turned away. "For what it's worth," Vian said, still eating, "I really won't tell anyone. About you being alive, I mean. I don't have anyone to tell. My family despises me. I don't have friends. The only people I ever talked to were the servants in my uncle's house, and they were too scared of Cordelia to be friendly." "Why does your family despise you?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. They're not my real parents, you know. I think I'm just too much trouble, too different. My brain works in ways that confuse them. I can't read anymore, and I ask too many questions." She poked at her cake. "I'm just broken, I guess. That's what they always say. Broken. Defective. Damaged. Pick your word." Kieran was quiet for a long moment. "You loved them," he said finally. "Your parents." Vian's fork stilled. "More than anything in the world. And they loved you." "Yes." Her voice cracked slightly. "They were the only ones who ever did. My daddy used to call me his little genius. He said my brain was a gift. He said I was special, not in a bad way, but in a real way. And my mom," she swallowed hard. "My mom used to say that being different just meant I saw the world in colors other people couldn't even imagine." The room fell silent. Outside, the lights of Philadelphia glittered against the night sky. Inside, two people sat in complicated stillness, one drowning in memories, the other watching with an intensity that saw too much. Finally, Kieran stood. "Finish your cake," he said, "then sleep. You'll stay in this room tonight." Vian looked up sharply. You're not going to silence me?" "Not tonight." "What about tomorrow?" "We'll see." He moved toward the door. "But Vian?" "Yes? If you tell anyone what you saw in that memorial hall, I have ways of handling problems that you can't even imagine. Do you understand?" She swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good." He opened the door, then paused. "One more thing." "What?" His dark eyes found hers across the room. "You're not broken. The people who told you that were wrong." He left before she could respond. Vian stared at the closed door for a long, long time. Then she looked down at her cake. Then, back at the door. "What is happening?" she whispered again. She didn't have an answer. But she had cake. And for the first time in 6 years, someone had told her she wasn't broken. Maybe tomorrow would bring danger. Maybe this strange, terrifying, impossibly beautiful man would decide she was too much of a risk. But tonight, she would eat chocolate cake and sleep in a bed softer than clouds. And for Vian Whitmore, that was more than enough. In the memorial hall, Kieran settled back into his coffin and closed his eyes. The ventilation system hummed beneath him, feeding fresh air into the confined space. He could hear footsteps approaching in the distance, murmured conversations, the sounds of a household preparing for a very important visitor. Silver was coming, his stepmother, his enemy, the woman who had married his dying father and spent years trying to claw the Ashford Empire from Kieran's hands. Not the woman who had almost certainly tried to have him killed. The car accident hadn't been an accident. Kieran's mechanics had found the evidence. Brake lines cut, accelerator tampered with. Someone had wanted him gone permanently, and they had almost succeeded. If he hadn't been trained in evasive driving since he was 16, if he hadn't managed to jump from the car before it plunged into the Schuylkill River, if Theo hadn't been following at a distance, ready to pull him from the water, He would be actually dead right now, and Silver would be celebrating. Instead, he was playing dead, watching, waiting, gathering evidence that would destroy her completely. And now, unexpectedly, there was Vian, the substitute bride, the girl with the sad eyes and the hungry stomach, the girl who had asked for birthday cake when he threatened her life. She was a complication he hadn't planned for. But as he lay there in the darkness, waiting for Silver to arrive and gloat over his corpse, Kieran found his mind drifting back to Vian's face, to the way she'd smiled when she tasted the cake, to the tears that had gathered in her eyes when she talked about her parents, to the small, defiant tilt of her chin when she'd said, "I want to know what it feels like to have birthday cake without anyone telling me I don't deserve it." She deserved it. The thought came unbidden, and he pushed it away. He didn't have time for sentiment. He had enemies to destroy, an empire to protect, a stepmother to expose. Vian Whitmore was a means to an end, nothing more. That's what he told himself. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that he was already lying. Vian woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of food. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just lay there with her eyes closed, certain she was dreaming, because the bed beneath her was soft, impossibly soft, and the pillow under her head smelled like lavender, and somewhere nearby, bacon was sizzling. Bacon. When was the last time she'd had bacon? She opened her eyes. The room was even more overwhelming in daylight. Dark hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine. Artwork on the walls that probably cost more than houses. A sitting area with leather furniture arranged around a fireplace. And through an open door, she could see a bathroom bigger than her entire attic room at the Whitmore house. This wasn't a dream. This was real. She was really here, in a dead man's bedroom, wearing the same wrinkled dress she'd arrived in, with chocolate cake probably still smeared on her face. A dead man who wasn't actually dead. A dead man who had threatened to silence her permanently. A dead man who had then brought her cake and told her she wasn't broken. Mrs. Ford? Vian sat up so fast she nearly tumbled off the bed. A young black woman stood in the doorway carrying a silver tray loaded with more food than Vian had seen in weeks. She had warm brown eyes, natural hair pulled back in a neat puff, and a gentle smile that immediately put Vian at ease. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," the woman said. "I'm Jada. Mr. Ford asked me to look after you." "Mr. Ford?" Vian's heart stuttered. "But he's supposed to be—" "Mr. Ford left very specific instructions before his passing," Jada said smoothly. And there was something in her eyes that told Vian she knew more than she was saying. "He wanted to make sure you were well cared for." She crossed the room and set the tray on the bedside table. Vian stared at the food. Pancakes stacked 3 high, golden and fluffy. Fresh berries in a small bowl. Scrambled eggs with cheese. Crispy bacon. 4 whole strips, orange juice, coffee. And beside all of that, a small pot of hot chocolate with a mountain of whipped cream. "This is all for me?" Vian whispered. "All of it." Jada's smile widened. "Mr. Ford was very particular. He said, and I quote, 'Feed her until she stops looking like a strong wind could carry her away.'" Vian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Oh, he said that?" "Word for word." Jada moved toward the door. "Take your time with breakfast. When you're ready, there's a bath drawn for you and fresh clothes in the wardrobe. The vigil ended last night, but the funeral is tomorrow. You'll want to rest today." "The vigil." Vian's brow furrowed. "I was supposed to attend the vigil. I was supposed to—" Mr. Ford made arrangements. Everything was handled. Jada paused at the door. "Mrs. Ford? If you need anything at all, just ring the bell by the bed. I'll be nearby." She left. And Vian sat there, staring at the feast before her, trying to process everything. She had slept through the entire vigil. She had failed at the one thing she was supposed to do. And instead of being punished, instead of being screamed at and called useless, she had been fed, cared for, protected by a dead man who wasn't dead. She picked up her fork with trembling fingers and took a bite of pancake. It was perfect. She ate until her stomach ached. The bath was heaven. Hot water, bubbles that smelled like vanilla, soft towels waiting on a heated rack. Vian sank into the massive tub and stayed there until her fingers pruned, letting the warmth seep into bones that had been cold for years. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a proper bath. At the Whitmore house, she was allowed 5-minute showers with lukewarm water, always last, always rushing because Elsa needed the bathroom for her 3-hour beauty routine. But here, no one banged on the door. No one screamed at her to hurry up. No one reminded her that she was a burden, a waste of resources, a drain on the family. Here, she was just allowed to exist. When she finally emerged, wrapped in the softest robe she'd ever touched, she found the wardrobe Jada had mentioned. It was filled with clothes, beautiful clothes, simple but elegant, blacks and navies and deep purples, appropriate for mourning but not ugly, dresses that looked like they would actually fit her, soft sweaters, comfortable shoes without holes, and at the bottom, tucked into a velvet-lined drawer, a small box. Vian opened it. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain with a single diamond pendant that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. There was a card tucked beneath it, small, handwritten. Vian's heart clenched. She couldn't read it. The letters swam and blurred the moment she tried to focus on them, rearranging themselves into meaningless shapes. Her chest tightened. Her palms went damp. That familiar shame crept up her throat like bile. She closed the box and put it back. Whatever the card said, she would never know. The rest of the day passed quietly. Vian explored the room, touched things she'd never be able to afford, tried on clothes that fit like they'd been made for her. Jada brought lunch, soup and fresh bread and a slice of chocolate cake that made Vian's eyes sting with unexpected emotion. No one bothered her. No one demanded anything from her. It was the most peaceful day she'd had in 6 years. That night, she fell asleep easily, her stomach full and her body warm for the first time in longer than she could remember. The funeral was held at Laurel Hill Cemetery on a gray Wednesday morning. Hundreds of people attended, politicians in dark suits, business executives with carefully arranged expressions of grief, society women in designer black dabbing at eyes that weren't actually wet, reporters kept at a distance by security, their cameras flashing like lightning. And at the center of it all, dressed in elegant black with a veil covering her face, stood Vian. The minister's words washed over her like water. Something about eternal rest, heavenly peace, a life cut short. None of it mattered, because the coffin they were burying was empty. And somewhere in the crowd, watching from a distance, stood the man everyone was mourning. Vian had spotted him earlier, tall figure in a dark overcoat, surgical mask covering the lower half of his face, large sunglasses hiding his eyes, a hat pulled low over his forehead. Anyone else would have seen just another mourner. But Vian recognized the way he stood, the breadth of his shoulders, the intensity of his gaze even through the disguise. Kieran. Their eyes met across the crowd. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod. And somehow, standing there surrounded by strangers, Vian felt less alone. The reception was held at the Ashford estate. The great hall had been transformed into a sea of white flowers and flickering candles. Tables groaned with elaborate food displays. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Vian shook hands, accepted condolences. Nodded through empty platitudes from faces that blurred together. She was exhausted in ways she couldn't describe. Finally, she found a quiet corner near a window and allowed herself a moment to breathe. That's when she noticed the woman. Platinum blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. Ice blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything and find it wanting. A black dress cut to flatter a figure that defied her age. The woman was staring directly at Vian, and she was walking this way. "So," the woman said, stopping in front of her, "you're the little wife." Vian straightened. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met." "No, we haven't." The woman's smile was thin and cold. "I'm Silver Ashford, Kieran's stepmother." Vian's blood went cold. This was her. The woman Kieran was hiding from. And the woman who had probably tried to have him killed. The woman who wanted everything he had built. And she was standing right in front of Vian, looking at her like she was something to be scraped off the bottom of an expensive shoe. "Mrs. Ashford," Vian managed. "I've heard... Kieran mentioned..." "Did he?" Silver's eyebrow arched. "I'm surprised. He didn't mention you at all. Not to me, not to the board, not to anyone. I didn't even know you existed until 3 days ago. The marriage was arranged, an old contract between our families. Yes, I'm aware of the Whitmore arrangement." Silver's ice blue eyes traveled over Vian's face. "I just never expected them to send someone so... young. I'm 22. Like I said, young." Silver moved closer, her perfume cloying and cold. "Tell me, little wife, what exactly do you know about your husband? About his business? About the empire you've apparently married into?" "I know he was respected," Vian said carefully. "Powerful. That people called him the Reaper, yes." Silver's smile sharpened. "Because he destroyed anyone who got in his way. Did they tell you that part? The companies he bankrupted? The rivals he crushed? The men who crossed him and were never heard from again?" Vian's throat tightened. "No. Of course not. The Whitmores only told you what they wanted you to hear." Silver leaned in, her voice dropping. "This world, Kieran's world, it eats people like you alive. You're soft, naive, completely unprepared for what's coming." "What's coming?" "The funeral is over. Tomorrow the lawyers descend. The board meets. Decisions will be made about the future of Ashford Industries." Silver's eyes glittered. "And you, little wife, will find out exactly how much you don't belong here." She walked away before Vian could respond. And Vian stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking, feeling smaller than she had in years. That night, Vian couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Silver's words over and over. "This world eats people like you alive. You're soft, naive. You'll find out exactly how much you don't belong here." Maybe Silver was right. Maybe Vian didn't belong here. Maybe she was just a pawn, a placeholder, a nobody who had stumbled into something she couldn't possibly understand. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. "Come in?" The door opened. Kieran. He stepped into the room, closing the door silently behind him. Still in all black, but without the funeral disguise now. Just him. Cornrows, jaw shadowed with stubble, dark eyes unreadable in the moonlight. "You met Silver," he said. "She found me at the reception." "I know, I was watching." Of course he was. He was always watching. "She said I don't belong here," Vian said quietly. "That this world will eat me alive." Kieran moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Do you believe her?" "I don't know. Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "She's wrong." "How do you know?" He turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his features were sharp and severe. "You're still here." It wasn't a long speech. It wasn't a list of reasons or a pep talk. Just 3 words. But somehow, they meant more than anything anyone had said to her in years. "Why did you marry me?" she asked suddenly. "Really, I know you said dead men can't protect their empires, but what does that actually mean?" Kieran was still for a long moment. When I die, my shares go to my legal spouse, not to Silver, not to the board. He paused. I needed someone she couldn't control. And you chose me? You don't even know me. I know the Whitmores, or at least my parents used to know them. They were the ones that arranged the marriage between me and their real daughter. His voice hardened. I wasn't going to honor it, but after the attempt on my life, I had to take advantage of it. But then they sent you instead of their real daughter because they thought I was gone, which means you're the one they valued least. Which means you're the one with the least loyalty to them, and that's even better. It should have hurt, being called the least valued. But somehow, the way he said it made it sound like an advantage. The funeral is over, he continued. In 3 days, Silver is calling an emergency board meeting. She thinks she's going to announce herself as the new head of Ashford Industries. But, his dark eyes met hers. But you're going to walk in and take it all from her. Me? Vian's eyes went wide. I can't run a company, I can't even… She stopped. Can't even what? Her face burned. Nothing. Kieran studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw more than she wanted him to, but he didn't press. Get some sleep, he said, moving toward the door. We have a lot of work to do. 3 days. 3 days of preparation. 3 days of coaching. 3 days of learning to become someone Vian had never imagined she could be. Theo drilled her on the basics. The board has 12 members. Silver has 4 of them bought. 3 are loyal to Kieran. The rest follow power. He positioned her in front of a mirror. Shoulders back, chin up, never look down, never look away first. What if someone asks me something I don't know? My advisors will follow up. Then move on. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Jada handled the wardrobe. Mr. Ford wants you to look powerful but not aggressive. Like someone who belongs, not someone trying to prove she does. The dress was perfect. Navy blue, not black. Sharp tailoring that made her look stronger. Subtle jewelry that whispered wealth. You look beautiful, Jada said softly. And through it all, Kieran appeared. Never for long, never during the day. But at night, he would slip into her room and check on her progress. He didn't give speeches or long explanations. He watched, he corrected. He nodded when she got something right. On the second night, after she successfully walked across the room 3 times without looking at her feet, he said simply, "Better." 1 word. It felt like a trophy. On the 3rd night, he found her sitting by the window, staring at the city lights. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. He moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Good. Good? Fear keeps you sharp. He glanced at her. Use it. They stood in silence for a moment. What if I fail? She whispered. Like then you learn. What if Silver destroys me? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. She won't. The certainty in his voice made her breath catch. You keep saying things like that, she said quietly. That she won't touch me. Why? Because I won't let her or anyone else hurt you. He answered simply. Why? She asked again, genuinely curious. He didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. I don't know yet. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even reassurance. But somehow, it was more honest than anything else he could have said. Get some sleep, he murmured. Tomorrow changes everything. The morning of the board meeting arrived cold and gray. Vian stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. Navy dress, perfect fit, hair styled elegantly, diamond studs in her ears, unsubtle makeup that made her look older, more sophisticated. She looked like someone who belonged. She felt like a fraud. Mrs. Ford. Theo appeared in the doorway. The car is ready. I can't do this. You can. I'm going to freeze up. Everyone's going to see that I'm just a scared girl who doesn't know anything. Mrs. Ford. Theo's voice was firm. You've survived 6 years with people who should have protected you trying to destroy you instead. You've survived being told every day that you were worthless. He met her eyes. Walking into a boardroom is nothing compared to that. A knock at the door. A tall man stepped into the room. Charcoal suit, surgical mask over his nose and mouth, large designer glasses hiding his eyes. Mr. K. Williams, Theo said smoothly. Junior associate at Pemberton and Associates. He'll be accompanying us. Behind the mask, familiar dark eyes met Vion's. Kieran. He didn't speak, didn't nod, just looked at her with an intensity that said more than words could. You can do this. I'll be right there. Don't let them see you shake. Vion took a deep breath. Let's go. Ashford Industries headquarters was a tower of glass and steel on Market Street. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. Vion stood between Theo and the disguised Kieran, her hands clasped to hide their trembling. Mr. Pemberton, the family lawyer, reviewed his notes quietly beside them. The doors opened. The boardroom was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows, massive table, 12 leather chairs occupied by 12 people who all turned to stare. And at the head of the table, dressed in pristine white, sat Silver Ashford. What is the meaning of this? Silver demanded, rising. This meeting is for board members and senior executives only. That girl has no business here. Mr. Pemberton stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Ashford, Mrs. Ford has every right to be present. He opened his briefcase with deliberate slowness. In fact, she has more right than anyone else in this room. Excuse me? He pulled out a thick stack of documents. As the widow of Kieran Ashford and sole inheritor of his 51% controlling shares in Ashford Industries, Mrs. Vion Ashford Ford is now the majority shareholder of this company. He placed the documents on the table. She doesn't just have the right to attend. She has the right to run it. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Silver's face went through several colors. White, red, purple. That's impossible, she spat. Kieran's shares should be held in trust until... Until what, Mrs. Ashford? Mr. Pemberton's voice was pleasant but sharp. Mr. Ashford's will was updated 3 months before his death. It explicitly names his spouse as sole beneficiary. He spread additional documents across the table. Marriage certificate, will, share transfer documents, all properly filed, witnessed, and notarized. He smiled. Everything is in perfect legal order. Silver grabbed the papers, hands shaking. This is a trick. She didn't even know him. She's just some substitute. The circumstances of the marriage are legally irrelevant. Mr. Pemberton tilted his head. Unless you have evidence of fraud, Mrs. Ashford, you have no case. Silver looked around the table at the board members she had spent years cultivating, and none of them would meet her eyes, because business people followed power, and the power now belonged to Vion. This isn't over, Silver said quietly. You're right. Every head turned. Vion stepped forward. Her heart was hammering. Her palms were sweating, but her voice was steady. It's just beginning. She lifted her chin. I know I'm not what you expected. I know I'm young, but I am Kieran Ashford's legal wife. I am the majority shareholder, and I am not going anywhere. She looked directly at Silver. Thank you for your concern about my qualifications. I'm sure your experience will be valuable. She paused. In an advisory capacity. Silver's face contorted with rage, but before she could respond, Theo spoke. This meeting is adjourned. Mrs. Ford will be in touch. The car ride back to the estate was quiet. Aunt Vion sat in the back seat, her hands still trembling, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had done it. She had actually done it. Beside her, Kieran removed his glasses first, then the mask, and he was looking at her differently than he ever had before. Not just watching, not just assessing. Something had shifted behind those dark eyes. Something intense and heated that made Vion's breath catch. "You did well," he said quietly. But the words didn't match his expression. His expression said something else entirely. His expression said he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. "I was shaking the entire time," she admitted. "You didn't show it. Silver is going to come after me. I saw it in her eyes." "Yes." Vion expected him to say more, to explain the plan, outline the next steps, discuss strategy. Instead, he just kept looking at her. His eyes traced over her face like he was memorizing it. The set of her jaw when she'd faced Silver. The steadiness in her voice when she'd claimed her power. The way she'd stood her ground in a room full of people who wanted to see her fail. "What?" Vion asked, suddenly self-conscious under the weight of his gaze. He didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual, rougher. "You surprised me. Is that good?" "I don't know yet." But the way he was looking at her suggested he was leaning toward yes. The car hit a bump, and Vion swayed slightly. Kieran's hand shot out, steadying her arm. His fingers were warm through her sleeve. He didn't let go immediately. For a long moment, they just looked at each other in the quiet of the car, and the city rolling past the windows, the tension thick enough to touch. Then Kieran released her arm and looked away. "Silver will regroup," he said, his voice carefully controlled again. "Find another angle. Try to discredit you." "And what do I do?" "Learn. Grow. Become strong enough that she can't touch you." He paused. "And let me handle the rest." The rest being finding the evidence I need to prove she tried to have me killed. His jaw tightened. "And making her pay." Vion was quiet for a moment. Then, "Kieran?" He looked at her. "Thank you for being there today, even if no one knew it was you." Something flickered in his expression, something almost vulnerable. "Get some rest tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow we start phase 2. But his eyes lingered on her face for just a moment longer than necessary, and Vion felt something shift between them, something that hadn't been there before. That night, Vion found a package waiting on her bed. Simple box, black paper, silver ribbon. She opened it carefully. Inside was a book, a children's book. Simple words, large print, colorful illustrations, and beneath it, a note card. Vion stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, painfully, she forced herself to focus. The letters swam at first, shifted, rearranged themselves the way they always did. But she didn't look away. She breathed deeply, let her eyes settle, focused on one word at a time. And gradually, letter by letter, she read, "Start here. We'll work on the rest together. K." Tears rolled down her cheeks. He had given her a children's book, not because he thought she was stupid, but because he understood she needed to start somewhere, and he was willing to help her find that starting point. Somehow he'd figured her problem out. His reputation as wickedly smart was no exaggeration. Maybe he had done some digging into her story as well. Had to. She opened the book to the first page, and for the first time in 6 years she tried to read. Family, family. Did you see the way Kieran looked at her in that car? That wasn't just respect. That wasn't just admiration for a job well done. If you think he just realized he's falling for someone he never expected to fall for, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment saying something has changed, because it absolutely has. The finale is coming, and trust me, everything is about to come to a head. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of Vion learning to navigate a world she'd never imagined she'd be part of. 2 weeks of meetings and documents and decisions that made her head spin. 2 weeks of Silver circling like a shark, watching, waiting, planning, and 2 weeks of reading lessons. They happened at night, after the household had retired. Kieran would appear in her sitting room, never announced, never expected, and sit beside her on the couch with whatever book they were working through. The children's book had given way to simple chapter books, then young adult novels, then, gradually, basic documents that Mr. Pemberton prepared with larger font. Progress was slow, painful. Some nights, Vian could barely get through a single page without her chest tightening and her vision blurring. But Kieran never lost patience. "Focus on one word," he would say, his voice low and steady beside her. "Just one. Let everything else disappear." "I can't. They're moving. They're all moving." "They're not. Your brain just thinks they are." He shifted closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his shoulder against hers. "Look at this word here. Just this one. Tell me what you see." She forced herself to focus, to breathe, to let the panic settle. "The," she spelled out slowly. "The." "Good. Now the next one." Word by word, letter by letter, night after night. It was exhausting, humiliating. Every session reminded her of everything she'd lost, everything that had been stolen from her. But it was also working. On the 10th night, she made it through an entire page without stopping. On the 12th night, and she read 2 pages out loud while Kieran listened in silence. On the 14th night, she finished a whole chapter. "Better," Kieran said when she closed the book. One word. But from him, it felt like a standing ovation. They were closer now. Vian couldn't pinpoint exactly when it had happened. Maybe it was the late nights together, the quiet intimacy of sharing space while she struggled through sentences. Maybe it was the way he looked at her when she succeeded. Something warm flickering behind those dark eyes. Maybe it was just proximity, 2 lonely people orbiting each other in a house full of secrets. But something had changed. Kieran still wasn't talkative. He didn't share his feelings or give long speeches about his past. But he showed up. Every night, without fail. And when she looked up from whatever she was reading, he was always watching her. Not with judgment, with something else entirely. "You're staring," she said one night, catching him. "I'm observing." Same thing. Not even close. But the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "What are you observing?" He was quiet for a moment. "You're different than you were 2 weeks ago." "Different how?" "Stronger, more confident." His eyes traced over her face. "You're eating properly now. It shows." Vian felt heat creep up her cheeks. She had noticed it too. Her face was fuller, her body less fragile. For the first time in years, she didn't look like she might break if someone touched her. "Is that a compliment?" she asked. "It's an observation. You could just say I look nice." I could, but he didn't. Instead, he reached over and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, feather light. Vian forgot how to breathe. "Keep reading," he said quietly. "You were doing well." She tried to focus on the book, but she could still feel where his fingers had touched her skin. The days that followed felt almost like a dream. Vian found herself longing for those quiet evening sessions, for the brush of Kieran's shoulder against hers, for the low rumble of his voice guiding her through difficult words. She caught herself watching for him during the day, listening for his footsteps in the hallway, wondering if he thought about her even half as much as she thought about him. It was dangerous, this feeling. He was her husband in name only, a strategic alliance, a means to an end. But her heart didn't seem to care about strategy. For the first time in 6 years, and Vian allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just survival. A future with warmth, with safety, with someone who saw her struggles and helped instead of mocking. Maybe, she thought, Maybe this fragile domestic peace could last. Maybe she could have something good for once. Maybe. But like all good things in Vion's life, her newfound stability was about to be shattered. The attack came 3 days later. Vion was in her sitting room, practicing reading a business report, when Theo burst through the door without knocking. His face told her everything she needed to know. Something was very wrong. "What happened?" she asked, setting down the papers. Silver made her move. Theo's jaw was tight. "She's filed a motion with the court challenging your fitness to hold shares." The room seemed to tilt. "On what grounds?" "Mental incompetence." He moved further into the room. "She's obtained documents from your uncle, medical records, court filings, evidence that you were placed under conservatorship 6 years ago due to cognitive impairment. Those records are lies. My uncle fabricated them. We know that." Theo cut her off. "But there's more. Silver has aligned herself with the Whitmores." Vion's blood ran cold. "What?" "Your uncle reached out to her 2 weeks ago, right after the board meeting. They've been working together ever since, sharing information, building a case." His voice was grim. "Silver provides the legal power and resources. The Whitmores provide testimony about your supposed mental deficiencies. Together, they're trying to prove you're unfit to manage your own affairs. I mean, let alone a billion-dollar company. But that's insane. They can't just... They can try. And if they succeed, your shares get placed in a trust managed by the board. A board Silver has been buying for years." Theo paused. "If we don't stop this, she takes everything." Vion's hands were shaking. "Where's Kieran?" "Waiting for you in his study. We need to move now." Kieran was pacing when she entered. She'd never seen him pace before. He was always so controlled, so still. But now he moved across the room like a caged predator, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with cold fury. "Silver and the Whitmores," he said without preamble. "I should have anticipated this." "You didn't know they'd work together?" "I knew Silver was desperate. I didn't expect your uncle to be stupid enough to align with her." He stopped pacing and faced her. "He doesn't realize she'll discard him the moment he's no longer useful. Can we stop them?" "Yes." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "This is actually better than I planned." "Better? How is this better?" "Because now I can destroy them all at once." Kieran moved to his desk, spreading documents across the surface. "The reason I've been playing dead, Vion, isn't just to hide from Silver. It's to watch, to wait, to see who else was involved in her schemes, who else would crawl out of the shadows when they thought I was gone." He tapped a thick folder. "I've been building a case, gathering evidence, following money trails. But I couldn't move too fast. Or Silver would realize I was alive and destroy the evidence before I could use it. I needed her to feel safe, to get sloppy, to make mistakes." "And did she?" "She made several." Kieran pulled out a stack of photographs. "Financial records showing she's been embezzling from Ashford Industries for years. Communications proving she bribed 4 board members. Bank transfers to Marcus Cole, the mechanic who sabotaged my car." He set down another folder. "And now, thanks to her alliance with your uncle, I have good reason to dig up dirt on him." "So you have everything you need?" "Almost." Kieran's dark eyes met hers. "There's one more piece, the most important piece." "What?" "You." "All right, family, I need to pause here because the pieces are coming together." Silver thought she was being clever, asked teaming up with the Whitmores to take Vion down. But she had no idea that Kieran has been watching this entire time, letting her dig her own grave deeper and deeper. He's got evidence of embezzlement, evidence of bribery, evidence of attempted murder, and now evidence that Silver is actively conspiring with the same family that abused his wife for 6 years. But what's this about Vion being the final piece? What role does she play in taking down Silver once and for all? Drop a comment saying "Trap is set" and make sure you're subscribed because the courtroom scene is coming and it's going to be everything. Now let me tell you what Kieran had planned. Me? Vian stared at him. What do I have to do with your evidence? Silver's entire case rests on proving you're mentally incompetent, that you can't read, that you can't function independently, that you're too damaged to manage your own affairs. Kieran's voice was steady. If you prove her wrong, publicly, undeniably, her case collapses. And when it collapses, I present the counter-evidence. You want me to read in court. I want you to show them who you really are. Not the broken girl the Whitmores created. Not the helpless victim Silver thinks she's attacking. His eyes burned into hers. The woman who survived 6 years of hell and came out stronger. The woman who took control of a boardroom full of hostile executives. The woman who learned to read again through sheer force of will. What if I can't? What if I freeze up? What if the letters start swimming and You won't. How do you know? Kieran moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Because I've watched you for 2 weeks. I've seen you fight through the panic. I've seen you refuse to give up even when every word felt impossible. His voice dropped. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Vian. You just don't know it yet. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she could be that person. And if I fail, she whispered, then I present the evidence anyway and we fight on different ground. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm, his grip steady. But you won't fail. I know you won't. He pulled her closer, and for a moment, they just stood there. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Kieran, the hearing is in 3 days. His voice was rough. That's 3 more nights of practice. 3 more nights together. And then? And then we end this. His eyes held hers. Together. The next 3 days were the most intense of Vian's life. She practiced reading for hours. Business documents, legal briefs, newspaper articles. Anything Theo could find that might resemble what she'd face in court. The panic still came sometimes. The letters still swam when she was tired or stressed. But she was learning to breathe through it, to slow down, to focus on one word at a time until her brain caught up. Kieran was there for every session. He didn't coddle her, didn't tell her she was doing amazing when she stumbled. But he didn't let her give up either. Every time she wanted to throw the papers across the room in frustration, he was there with that steady voice, that unwavering presence. Again. I can't. You can. Again. And she would try again. On the second night, something shifted. They were sitting close together on the couch, Vian struggling through a particularly dense legal document, when she finally made it through the entire page without a single mistake. She looked up, triumphant, and found Kieran watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. What? She asked. Nothing. But his voice was different, softer. His eyes dropped to her lips, then quickly away. You did well. That's all? What else should there be? I don't know. A standing ovation? A trophy? A slice of cake? He almost smiled. You and your cake. You started it. You're the one who brought me birthday cake in the middle of threatening to silence me permanently. I wasn't actually going to hurt you. I didn't know that at the time. No. He was quiet for a moment. You didn't. And yet you still asked for cake instead of mercy. Like you said, I'm strange. I said you were extremely strange. Vian snorted. You know you love it. She meant it as a joke, a throwaway comment to fill the silence. But Kieran didn't laugh. He didn't deny it either. His eyes moved over her slowly. Not just her face this time. Lower. taking in the way her body had changed over the past weeks. The new softness of her arms, the curve of her hips beneath the thin fabric of her nightgown, the fullness that proper meals had finally given her. Vian's cheeks burned. She pulled the throw blanket up to her chest, suddenly aware of how little her nightgown covered. How different she must look now compared to the half-starved girl who had stumbled into his memorial hall begging for cake. "Can you stop looking at me like that?" she mumbled. "Like what?" "Like, I don't know, like you're cataloging me." "Maybe I am. Why?" He didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. "You look healthy now, strong." His eyes met hers. "It suits you." Vian didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her the way Kieran was looking at her now, like she wasn't broken, like she wasn't too much or too little, like she was exactly right. She wrapped her arms around herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. I should probably get some sleep," she managed. Kieran stood slowly, his movements controlled, undeliberate. "Good night, Vian." "Good night." He paused at the door, glancing back at her one more time, and the heat in his gaze made her forget how to breathe. The morning of the hearing, Vian stood in front of her mirror and took a deep breath. No black today. She was done with morning colors. Instead, she wore a corporate ruby gown, a tailored dress that hugged her curves, curves she actually had now after weeks of proper meals, gold jewelry that caught the light, her natural hair styled in goddess locks that cascaded over her shoulders. She looked like a queen. She felt like a warrior. "Mrs. Ford?" Jada appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright with emotion. "You look powerful." "I don't feel powerful. I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That's normal." Jada crossed to her, adjusting a curl that had fallen out of place. "Powerful people get scared too. They just don't let it stop them." A knock at the door. Theo entered first, immaculate in a charcoal suit. Behind him came Mr. Pemberton with his ever-present briefcase. And behind them, a tall man in a burgundy suit that made him look like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. Surgical mask covering his nose and mouth, designer glasses hiding his eyes. But Vian would recognize those shoulders anywhere. Kieran. He was coming to court with them. "Ready?" Theo asked. Vian looked at the masked figure, at the eyes she knew were watching her with that familiar intensity. "Ready." The Philadelphia County Courthouse was chaos. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing like lightning. Security struggled to hold back crowds of curious onlookers. Yet the story had captured the city's imagination. Young widow challenged by scheming stepmother, questions about mental fitness, billions of dollars at stake. Vian walked through the crowd with her head high. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. And there, at the plaintiff's table, sat Silver Ashford. She was dressed in pure white, like an angel of justice. Her platinum hair gleamed under the courtroom lights. Her ice-blue eyes tracked Vian's entrance with barely concealed satisfaction. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, in the front row of the gallery, sat Uncle Lennox, Aunt Cordelia, Elsa, and Dorian. The Whitmores had come to watch her fall. Vian met her uncle's eyes. He smiled. That same cold smile from the memorial hall. She didn't look away. Instead, she smiled back, and had the satisfaction of watching his confidence flicker. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison." The judge entered, a stern black woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with the air of someone who had seen every trick in the book. "Be seated." She shuffled papers. "This hearing will determine whether there are grounds to challenge Mrs. Vian Ashford Ford's capacity to manage her own financial affairs, including her controlling shares in Ashford Industries. Plaintiff may proceed." Silver's lawyer rose. He was good, polished, confident, with a voice that carried authority. Your Honor, the plaintiff contends that the defendant suffers from cognitive impairments that render her unfit to manage assets of this magnitude. Side, we have medical records, court documents, and witness testimony establishing that Mrs. Ford has been under conservatorship since the age of 16 due to documented mental deficiencies. He presented the documents, the forged records, the fraudulent medical evaluations. We will demonstrate that Mrs. Ford cannot read at a basic adult level, cannot process complex information, and cannot make sound decisions about business matters. We will show that her marriage to the late Kieran Ashford was orchestrated by her family to exploit a vulnerable woman, and that she is being manipulated by unidentified third parties who seek to control the Ashford fortune through her. He sat down. Judge Morrison turned to the defense table. Response? Mr. Pemberton rose. Your Honor, we intend to prove that the conservatorship established over Mrs. Ford was fraudulent, that the medical records presented are fabricated, that the witnesses who will testify against her today are the same people who exploited her for 6 years. His voice hardened. And we intend to show that this entire proceeding is part of a larger conspiracy to steal Mrs. Ford's rightful inheritance and control of Ashford Industries. The gallery murmured. Silver's lawyer scoffed. Your Honor, these are wild accusations without... The defense will have its opportunity to present evidence, Judge Morrison interrupted. Plaintiff may call its first witness. They brought out the Whitmores one by one. Uncle Lennox took the stand first, his voice dripping with false concern. We did everything we could for her, took her in when she had no one, provided for her, tried to help her overcome her challenges. He shook his head sadly. But Vian was never quite right. Even as a child, she struggled with basic tasks, reading, following instructions, understanding social situations. And her parents? The lawyer prompted. My brother spoiled her, refused to acknowledge her limitations. He thought if he just pretended she was normal, she would be. Lennox sighed. When he died, we inherited a deeply damaged young woman who had been sheltered from the reality of her condition. Vian's hands clenched under the table. Cordelia was worse. She couldn't read a simple recipe, she testified, tears in her eyes. We tried to teach her, tried to help her, but she would just stare at the page and cry. It was heartbreaking. And you reported these concerns to authorities? We did. We had her evaluated. The doctors confirmed what we already knew, that Vian needed supervision, that she couldn't care for herself. Cordelia dabbed at her eyes. We were only trying to protect her. Elsa was the cruelest. She's not capable of running a company, Elsa said flatly. She can barely tie her own shoes. The idea that she inherited billions of dollars is absurd. She probably doesn't even understand what $1 billion means. And her reading ability? Non-existent, Elsa smirked. You could put a children's book in front of her and she couldn't get through the first page. She's 22 years old and she reads like a kindergartner. If she reads at all. The gallery murmured. Judge Morrison's eyes moved to Vian, assessing. When the plaintiff rested, Mr. Pemberton rose. Your Honor, before we present our evidence, and we would like to address the plaintiff's central claim that Mrs. Ford cannot read. Proceed. Mr. Pemberton walked to the evidence table and picked up a thick document. This is the full text of the conservatorship agreement that Mr. Whitmore filed 6 years ago. It contains complex legal language, multiple subclauses, and technical terminology. He turned to Vian. Mrs. Ford, would you please read the first 3 paragraphs aloud for the court? The room went silent. Vian's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything depended on. She stood slowly, her legs trembling beneath her emerald dress. She crossed to where Mr. Pemberton stood and took the document from his hands. The letters swam, just like she'd feared. She could feel everyone watching. Silver's smug satisfaction. The Whitmore's anticipation of her failure. The judge's careful evaluation. Breathe, she told herself. One word at a time. Just like Kieran taught you. She focused on the first word. Let everything else blur. And began to read. This conservatorship agreement, entered into on the 15th day of March 2018, establishes the terms and conditions under which Lennox Harrison Whitmore shall serve as conservator of the estate and person of Vion Elaine Whitmore, hereinafter referred to as the protected person. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. The conservator shall have full authority to manage all assets, properties, and financial instruments belonging to the protected person, including but not limited to bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, and any inheritance or trust distributions to which the protected person may be entitled. She looked up. The protected person is hereby deemed incapable of managing her own affairs due to cognitive impairment as documented in the attached medical evaluation, and shall remain under the supervision of the conservator until such time as a court of competent jurisdiction determines otherwise. She set the document down. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mrs. Ford, you just read 3 paragraphs of complex legal text without hesitation. Would you care to explain how this aligns with the plaintiff's claim that you cannot read? It doesn't, Your Honor. Vion's voice was steady. Because their claim is a lie. That's impossible. Elsa shot to her feet. She couldn't read 3 months ago. So she couldn't read 3 weeks ago. This is some kind of trick. Miss Whitmore, you will sit down, Judge Morrison snapped. She's faking it. She memorized that document somehow. Sit down, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Elsa sat, but her face was twisted with rage. Judge Morrison turned back to Mr. Pemberton. Counselor, you may continue. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Pemberton returned to the defense table. We would now like to present evidence regarding the fraudulent nature of the conservatorship itself. Proceed. The medical records submitted by the plaintiff were signed by Dr. Harold Grimes and Dr. Nina Vasquez. Both doctors received substantial payments from Lennox Whitmore in the weeks before and after the conservatorship was established. He presented bank records. Dr. Grimes received $50,000. Dr. Vasquez received $75,000. Neither doctor actually examined Mrs. Ford. Their signatures were purchased. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Furthermore, Mr. Pemberton continued, we have evidence that Lennox Whitmore embezzled over $15 million from Mrs. Ford's trust fund over the past 6 years. Money that should have been held for her until her 25th birthday. Money that was instead used to fund his family's lifestyle. More documents, more evidence. And finally, Your Honor, we have evidence connecting Mrs. Silver Ashford to this fraud. Silver's head snapped up. What? Bank records showing Mrs. Ashford transferred $200,000 to Mr. Whitmore 3 weeks ago. Mr. Pemberton's voice was hard. Communications between them coordinating their legal strategy. Emails in which Mrs. Anna Ashford explicitly states her intention to use the Whitmore's testimony to remove Mrs. Ford from control of Ashford Industries. He placed the evidence on the judge's bench. This isn't just a case of disputed mental fitness, Your Honor. This is a conspiracy. Mrs. Ashford and the Whitmores are working together to steal Mrs. Ford's rightful inheritance and to steal control of Ashford Industries. Silver was on her feet. This is outrageous. These documents are fabricated. Sit down, Mrs. Ashford. I will not sit down while my reputation is being... Sit down. Silver sat, but her eyes were wild now, panicked. The confidence that had carried her into this courtroom was crumbling. Judge Morrison studied the evidence for a long moment. These are serious allegations, Counselor. Do you have corroboration? We do. Your Honor. Mr. Pemberton nodded toward Theo, who stood near the back of the courtroom. Mr. Sterling, if you please. Theo stepped forward. Your Honor, my name is Theodore Sterling. I served as head of security for Kieran Ashford for 8 years. In that capacity, I had access to extensive surveillance and financial monitoring systems. And what evidence can you provide? Silver Ashford has been embezzling from Ashford Industries for 5 years. She's bribed 4 board members to support her interests. And several weeks ago, Theo's voice hardened. She arranged to have Kieran Ashford murdered. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, reporters scrambling to take notes. Judge Morrison banging her gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this court. The noise subsided slowly. Silver was standing, her face white as chalk. This is insane. Kieran died in a car accident. It was investigated. There was nothing. The investigation was incomplete, Theo said calmly. It failed to discover that the brake lines had been cut, that the accelerator had been tampered with, that a mechanic named Marcus Cole had been paid $100,000 to make the crash look like an accident. You can't prove any of this? Actually, Theo said, we can. We have security footage. We have bank records. We have a sworn statement from Mr. Cole himself. He paused. And we have a witness who can testify to everything. What witness? Silver's voice was shrill now. Who could possibly? Your Honor, Mr. Pemberton interrupted. The defense calls its final witness. Proceed. In the gallery, a tall man in a burgundy suit rose slowly to his feet. He reached up and removed his glasses, then his surgical mask, and Kieran Ashford's face was revealed to the world. The scream that tore from Silver's throat was barely human. No, no, this isn't. You're dead. I saw your body. I watched them put you in the ground. Kieran walked forward, each step deliberate, his dark eyes fixed on the woman who had tried to murder him. The courtroom was in absolute chaos. People were standing, shouting, cameras flashing despite the judge's orders. Security struggled to maintain control, but Kieran moved through it all like a force of nature. He reached the front of the courtroom and turned to face the judge. Your Honor. His voice cut through the noise, commanding instant silence. My name is Kieran Ashford. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Judge Morrison looked like she was having a religious experience. Mr. Ashford, you're supposed to be. We held a funeral. I know, I attended. His voice was ice. In disguise. Because someone in this room tried to have me killed, and I needed time to prove who it was. His eyes moved to Silver. She had collapsed back into her chair, her face gray, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I have spent the past weeks gathering evidence, Kieran continued. Following money trails, documenting communications, building an airtight case against the woman who destroyed my father's memory by marrying him, spent years stealing from his company, and finally decided to dispose of me when I got in her way. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder. Blackie's security footage showing Marcus Cole tampering with my vehicle 2 hours before I drove off the Schuylkill Bridge. Bank records showing Silver Ashford's payments to him. Communications in which she explicitly discusses making my death look like an accident. He placed the folder on the judge's bench. Silver Ashford tried to kill me. She's been stealing from my company for years. And she conspired with the Whitmores to destroy my wife using fabricated evidence of mental incompetence. He turned to face Silver directly. You thought I was gone. You thought you had finally won. His voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. You were wrong. Silver lunged. Security barely caught her in time, grabbing her arms as she screamed and clawed toward Kieran. You were supposed to die. I planned everything perfectly. You were supposed to die and everything was supposed to be mine. Get her out of here, Judge Morrison ordered. They dragged Silver from the courtroom, her screams echoing off the marble walls until the doors closed and cut them off. In the gallery, the Whitmores were trying to flee. They didn't get far. Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore. Judge Morrison's voice was cold. You will remain where you are. Given the evidence presented today, I am issuing immediate warrants for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You can't do this, Lennox shouted. She's just a stupid girl. She doesn't deserve— Enough. The word cracked through the courtroom like a whip. Everyone turned. Vian was standing. Her ruby dress caught the light. Her goddess locks cascaded over her shoulders. Her eyes that had once been filled with fear and shame, now burned with something entirely different. Power. I am not stupid, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. I was never stupid. I was a grieving girl who lost her parents and was taken in by people who should have protected me. She walked forward, each step steady and sure. Instead of helping me, you exploited me. You denied me education. You denied me medical care. You gave me food at random. You hurt me. You told me every single day that I was worthless, that I was broken, that no one would ever want me. She stopped directly in front of her uncle. You stole my inheritance. You stole my confidence. You stole 6 years of my life. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. But you couldn't steal everything. You couldn't steal my intelligence. You couldn't steal my resilience. And you couldn't steal my future. She leaned closer. Because I'm still here. I learned to read again. I took control of a billion-dollar company. I married a man who sees my worth when no one else did. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And you're the ones in handcuffs. So tell me, Uncle Lennox, who's really broken? She turned her back on him and walked away. Security closed in, and the Whitmores were dragged from the courtroom, their protests fading into nothing. The hearing was dismissed. Judge Morrison ruled that the conservatorship had been fraudulently obtained and should be immediately dissolved. She ordered a full investigation into the Whitmores' handling of Vian's trust fund. She referred Silver's case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. And she confirmed, unofficially and publicly, that Vian Ashford Ford was mentally competent and fully entitled to her position as majority shareholder of Ashford Industries. Case dismissed, the judge said. And Mr. Ashford, welcome back from the dead. Something that might have been a smile crossed Kieran's face. Thank you, Your Honor. The courthouse steps were madness. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, questions were shouted from every direction. But Kieran's security formed a protective wall, guiding Vian and Kieran to a waiting car. They slid inside, and the door closed, cutting off the chaos. Silence. Vian sat with her hands in her lap, her heart still racing, her mind still processing everything that had happened. You did it, Kieran said quietly. She looked at him. He was watching her with that intensity she knew so well. But there was something else in his eyes now. Something warmer, softer. Something that looked a lot like awe. You read that document in front of everyone. You faced down your family. You stood in that courtroom and proved to the entire world who you really are. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers interlaced with hers, warm and strong. You've always had this in you, Vian. I just helped you see it. She felt tears prick her eyes. Kieran, I spent 3 months watching you, learning you, seeing how strong you are, how brave, how genuinely good. His voice roughened. I told myself it was strategy, that you were just a piece on the board, but I was lying. His free hand came up to cup her face. I'm not lying anymore. He kissed her, not soft, not tentative. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. Her fingers gripped the lapels of his burgundy jacket. The kiss deepened, became something fierce and desperate and full of everything they hadn't said. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Vian laughed shakily. We really do everything out of order, don't we? We do. His hands were still on her waist, thumbs tracing circles through the fabric of her dress. But we can fix that. How? His eyes held hers. Marry me. Again. Properly this time. With a real ceremony and a real party and a real cake. We're already married. I know. But I want to do it right. His voice softened. I want to give you everything you never had, Vian. Starting with the wedding you deserved. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you again. He kissed her once more. And in the back of that car, surrounded by chaos, Vian finally let herself believe that good things could happen to her after all. 2 months later, the gardens of the Ashford estate had been transformed. White flowers cascaded from every surface. Candles flickered in crystal holders as the sun set over Philadelphia. A string quartet played softly as guests found their seats. It was a wedding. A real wedding. Vian stood at the end of the aisle in a dress that made her feel like royalty. Simple white silk that skimmed her curves. Delicate lace sleeves. Her natural hair styled in an elaborate crown of braids and curls, woven with tiny white flowers. She was beautiful. She was happy. She was finally home. At the altar, Kieran waited. He was devastating in black, as always. His signature 5 o'clock shadow perfectly trimmed. His cornrows freshly done. A white rose in his lapel. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They were soft. Open. Full of something she had seen growing for months, but that he'd finally stopped hiding. Love. Real, unmistakable love. She walked toward him on legs that trembled, not from fear, but from joy. When she reached the altar, he took her hands. Hi, she whispered. Hi. His voice was rough with emotion. You look acceptable? Perfect. He swallowed hard. Absolutely perfect. The minister began to speak. Vian barely heard the words. She was too focused on Kieran's hands holding hers. On the way, his thumbs traced circles on her skin. On the way, he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Do you, Kieran Marcus Ashford, untake this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward? I do. And do you, Vian Elaine Whitmore, take this man to be your husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward? Vian smiled through her tears. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. The minister smiled. You may kiss the bride. Kieran's hand slid to her waist, pulling her close. Ready to do this properly? He murmured. Finally. He kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. The crowd erupted in applause. And Vian Ashford Ford, the girl who had once believed she was broken, finally understood what it meant to be whole. The reception was everything she had ever dreamed. Dancing beneath strings of lights, laughter and champagne and toasts that made her cry, and food that made her eyes roll back in pleasure. And through it all, Kieran stayed close. His hand on her back, his eyes finding hers across the room. His rare smiles, more frequent now, reserved only for her. Near midnight, Jada appeared at her elbow. Mrs. Ashford, there's one more surprise. Vian looked up to see Jada carrying a tray. On it sat a cake. Not the elaborate wedding cake they'd already cut. Something simpler, more personal. A single-layer chocolate cake with white frosting roses and a single candle burning in the center. Happy birthday, Vian, Jada said softly. 5 months late, but better late than never. Vian stared at it, tears streaming down her face. Kieran appeared beside her, his arm sliding around her waist. I told you I'd give you everything you never had, he said quietly. Starting with birthday cakes. Kieran, make a wish. She looked at the candle, at the cake. at the man standing beside her with his arm around her waist and love in his eyes. "I don't need to," she whispered. "Everything I ever wished for is already here." But she closed her eyes anyway, and when she opened them, she blew out the candle. 1 year later, Vian stood at the window of her office looking out over Philadelphia. So much had changed. Silver was in prison, convicted of attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. The Whitmores had been found guilty on multiple charges. Lennox and Cordelia were serving time, while Elsa and Dorian had accepted plea deals that still left them behind bars for years. The company was thriving under Vian and Kieran's joint leadership. Her parents' foundation was funding education and medical care for underprivileged children across the city. She had hired a reading specialist who continued working with her, and while she still sometimes struggled with dense text, she could read confidently now, without the panic, without the shame. And she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. A knock at her door made her turn. Kieran stood in the doorway, as devastatingly handsome as always. "Ready for lunch?" "In a minute." She crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist. "I was just thinking." About? About how far we've come." She looked up at him. "A year ago, I was a scared girl who couldn't read, convinced I was worthless. And you were a dead man in a coffin who thought I was just a means to an end. You were never just a means to an end. You didn't know that at first." "No," he admitted, "but I learned quickly." His arms tightened around her. "Somewhere between the birthday cake and the reading lessons, I realized you were the most extraordinary person I'd ever met. Even when I tried to exercise you by yelling about the light." He laughed. A real laugh, the kind she heard more often now. Especially then. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing I was worth saving when no one else did." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "For giving me birthday cake. The cake was strategic. Was it?" "Yes. I calculated that anyone who asks for dessert while facing death would be too interesting to hurt." He paused. "I was right. I'm not just interesting. No." His eyes softened. "You're everything." She kissed him, slow and sweet and full of gratitude. When they broke apart, Kieran took her hand. "Come on, lunch is waiting." He led her toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Jada mentioned something about chocolate cake for dessert." Vian laughed. "There's always chocolate cake. As long as you want it." He squeezed her hand. "As long as you want anything, Vian, I'll make sure you have it." She believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed she deserved good things. And as they walked out together, hand in hand into the sunlight, Vian finally understood what her mama had meant all those years ago. Being different wasn't a curse, it was a gift. And she was just getting started. Family, we made it. We watched Vian go from a scared, starving girl who couldn't read to a CEO running a billion-dollar company, standing up to her abusers in open court, and loved by a man who would move heaven and earth for her. We watched Kieran go from a cold, calculating strategist playing dead in a coffin to a loving husband who buys his wife birthday cakes and helps her learn to read again. So, what's the lesson here? Never let anyone define your worth. Not your family, not your circumstances, not your struggles. Your struggles do not define your value. Thank you for taking this journey with me, family. If this story touched your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and never stop believing in yourself. Peace.